Oh, oh, okay. So, I just watched the recently released horror film Talk to Me, and I just have to talk to you about it. The movie is amazing, and it's been getting a lot of well-deserved hype out of the festival circuit, even into its theatrical release. In this video, I want to focus on why Talk to Me is such a great horror film. I'll leave the last bit of the video for some spoilers just so I can tie it all together, but I'll give you a heads up in case you want to avoid them. To start, let me just generally call out some of the great things about this movie. The lead actress, Sophie Wilde, is absolutely astonishing. She dives headfirst into this role and absolutely dominates it. You are with her in almost every frame of the movie, and she not only commands the screen, she drives the entire story so effectively. Her physical performance is just as captivating as her emotional tenderness and vulnerability throughout the film. The supporting cast is equally as effective. Miranda Otto, Alexandra Jansen, Joe Bird, Zoe Tarakis, and Chris Alosio all give outstanding performances. They really understood the assignment they were given in this film, and they played their parts perfectly. A huge shout out has to be given to the Philippou brothers for their directorial debut because this is just an absolute home run. If you don't know who they are, they're popular YouTubers that made the jump from YouTube to feature-length film. This is not an easy transition, and it's one that has been botched several times in the past.
Today is the day where I have some heart-to-hearts with my dad, the governor, but more importantly today, my workout scene, so.
That being said, the Philippou brothers absolutely nailed their debut film, and you can clearly see their fingerprints all over it. Their channel has a lot of very inventive camera work and intricately staged sequences that shows us why they have a vision deserving of a big screen format. If you haven't yet, I'd highly recommend checking out their channel. Talk to Me just does so many things right from a story, character, and genre perspective. But to really understand why it's as good as it is, we have to understand what came before it. Over the last decade or so, there were some absolutely amazing horror films. Before that, there were some that kind of fell flat. The 2000s popularized the gimmicky, found footage style, starting with the first Blair Witch Project and morphing into Paranormal Activity, Wreck, or even Cloverfield. Though this style masquerades as though it puts you in the character's shoes, it really just forces the audience to be a fly on the wall and alienates them. I mean, have you ever had to sit and watch someone else's home videos before? Maybe I'm just a terrible person, but if you don't see yourself in them, you kinda don't give a shit. Oh my god, you have to see little Riley's first steps. This is his right foot, and then he takes a step with his left foot, and then his right foot, and then his left foot, and then his right foot. And right about here is when the monster starts to attack, so we have to pick up our pace a little bit, but it's gonna be okay.
I don't give a shit.
It doesn't matter what the style of the film is, like whether it's shot as though it's found footage or not. If you are just flat out not invested in the characters, then everything that happens is basically face value. These films fell short because they tried to force a personal connection with the characters simply for the fact that you're watching their account of the experience. That doesn't equate to personal investment. Luckily, new and original filmmakers came along to revive the horror genre before it went stale. They stripped things down to their most basic levels: story and character. Films like The Babadook, It Follows, Hereditary, The Witch, and Midsommar took a simpler and ultimately a more cinematic approach. Gone were the days of nauseating camera work, and in came the devastatingly intentional storytelling of character-driven narratives. It wasn't about creating a flashy experience for the audience without any substance. Now, everything was directly tied to the character's journey, and the only way for the conflict to end was for the characters to overcome their own flaws and challenges. As we experience the story with the characters, we as an audience get to learn something about ourselves. It wasn't forced or hiding behind a gimmick, and the films actually had something to say. The Babadook and Hereditary tell a story about grief and how the unsaid, unaddressed things in our relationships can unravel into deeper, darker things. Midsommar and The Witch show us the anxiety of not belonging or being exiled and isolated by those you care about. If you see a version of yourself in the film, or you can at least relate to it, you allow yourself to be vulnerable to it. Not every film requires this kind of deeper meaning, and that depth also doesn't need to constantly bash you over the head. But when executed properly, adding in these layers provides purpose and rewatchability to the film. The themes can be pretty universal, and seeing a lead character experience it provides a natural entrance for the audience to dive into the story. It's pretty obvious. If you sympathize with the character, then you care about what's happening to them. And once you're invested, the horror that is tied to the main characters suddenly feels personal to you. The character's trauma now becomes your trauma! Talk to Me capitalizes on these elements perfectly. The horror feels so personal and intentional to the characters that it almost feels like it's happening to us. It doesn't matter whether we as an audience would make the same decisions as the characters do. We've all experienced the same kinds of grief and dismay that the lead character of Mia has, in one way or another. So at the very least, we can understand what she's feeling and how devastating it is. There's plenty of horror elements and imagery in the film that are scary on their own, but once you apply context to those scenes, then everything else around it is amplified. Now, before I get into the spoiler bit, let me just say that if you haven't seen Talk to Me yet, I could not more highly recommend it. This film is an instant classic and the culmination of a return to form for the horror genre. Okay, here we go. Spoiler time. If this is when you click away from the video, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Talk to Me does an amazing job of delivering a metaphor without drowning you in it. Of course, everyone will get a different meaning out of it, but I think that it's pretty clear that this movie has something to say about social media and how dangerous trends are spread on the internet. But I don't think that this is the main message of the movie. The major theme of the movie is about unhealthy habits as coping mechanisms, specifically in response to grief. The scenes where the characters are taking turns using the hand to speak to the dead, and everyone is laughing and recording their experiences, feels like a party of underage people overindulging in something that they're taking for granted. This is a clear allegory for drug use and party culture. Just look at the moments of euphoria that the characters feel when they use the hand. It's like they're walking a tightrope and continually want to ride that adrenaline rush. When Jade's little brother tries the hand without her permission, we get a glimpse of what kind of damage it can really do. The bit where he repeatedly bashes his head against the table, flies away in the chair, and continues hitting his head on the nightstand was more brutal than the classroom scene in Hereditary, and was clearly an example of overdosing. When it happened again in the hospital, I thought for sure this kid was dead. Even though he was under the entity's control, his spirit wasn't broken, hence the entity trying to break him down and make him suffer. Mia even says while she's using the hand that the spirits like him, so he's the real target for them, not Mia. She is in such a weakened state, both emotionally and mentally, that she just happens to be the easiest vessel for them. The major conflict revolves around the fact that the main character is seeking some kind of closure when she uses the hand. Her reason for using it is different than everybody else's. The unhealthy habits that I mentioned then explore a kind of addiction as Mia continues to use the hand time and time again to try to connect with her recently deceased mother. But the power really lies with the spirit that she is connected to, and this is clearly not her mother. We're told that the spirits can manipulate their hosts, and Mia buys into this manipulation even before she gets possessed. The fact that the spirits get weaker the longer they are attached to their host speaks to the representation of addiction. As the movie progresses, the spirit starts to lose its form the longer it is attached to Mia, looking less and less like her mother, and more like the drowned spirit we saw earlier. Mia is also disconnected from her family, namely her father. There is an inherent distrust that she has towards him, and she doesn't feel safe confiding in or connecting with him. Like Amelia's inability to communicate with her son about their mutual grief in the Babadook, Mia can't bring herself to be vulnerable with her father and vice versa. Similarly to Danny in Midsommar or Thomasin in The Witch, Mia feels isolated by someone who should be there for her. So instead, she finds her own connections and outlet. Danny, Thomasin, and even Peter in Hereditary all get wrapped up in some pretty culty things. But not Mia. Oh, wait. When her father finally reads the note that her mom left behind, that was the final straw for Mia's possession. Her already ingrained disdain for her father boils over violently. There's no coming back for her. Even when the people she cares about the most are put in harm's way, Mia is too obsessed with the spiritual experience and blinded to any semblance of reality. In the final scenes of the film, Mia tries to kill Riley in the hospital, clearly still following the will of the spirit governing her. Since he is still under the control of the spirits as well, if he dies, then he will be trapped in the spirit realm forever, which is exactly what the spirits want. But Mia can't bring herself to do it intentionally. I mean, she did stab her father in the neck, but that was accidental and self-defense. This echoes a scene earlier in the film when they came across a gravely injured kangaroo on the road. Though the humane thing to do would have been to end its suffering, she couldn't find the courage to do it. Even trying to run it over was too much for her. So, she opts to take Riley to a nearby highway overpass, presumably to just let go of the wheelchair and let him fall into traffic.
I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you.
Now, we don't exactly see how it goes down, but ultimately, Mia ends up being the one to fall into traffic. Personally, I think Jade showed up in time and yeeted Mia away from her brother.
Kick the baby! Don't kick the baby.
This makes the most sense to me because when Mia gets up after being hit by the car, she doesn't know what happened and Jade is already holding her brother. Regardless, Mia sees glimpses of Riley being released from the hospital and her father, who apparently recovered from being stabbed in the fucking neck, leaving the hospital. She comes to the realization that she is actually dead and is now trapped in the spirit realm, bringing the story full circle as we see her connecting with the physical world through the infamous hand. This chilling ending works so perfectly thematically. Her blind obsession, recklessness, and willingness to believe the spirit's delusions paint a portrait of how desperate responses to trauma lead to devastating and ultimate consequences. This is what makes the horror personal. These themes echo through the story and get us invested in the characters, because we've all experienced those themes in our own ways. Rather than relying on cheap, trendy filmmaking techniques, Talk to Me is a perfect example of actually putting in the work to define its characters in a realistic and believable way, and takes us on a journey that is as relatable as it is fantastical and horrifying. Where the found footage fad tried to manifest personal connection to the characters through a lazy gimmick, the best horror films of the last decade or so have skewed to actually telling a compelling story and tying the horror directly to the characters. Plus, that horror is grounded in something very human and universal. Films like The Babadook, Hereditary, Midsommar, The Witch, they all paved the way for a film like Talk to Me to shine and to thrive in all its glory. And oh, is it glorious. Well, what did you think? How did you like Talk to Me? What are some of your favorite horror films? Drop a comment down below and let me know. And while you're at it, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. You can also find me in our Discord channel, follow me on Twitter or Instagram, and check out my live streams on Twitch. Let me know if there's a movie or game you think I should check out next. In the meantime, be well, and I'll see you in the next video.
Spicy!